Hey, it's Peter with the Garden Family, and in this video I am going to show you that no matter what type of raspberry plant you have, there is only one rule of how to prune it. Raspberries are incredibly easy to grow, and I think everyone should grow them for a few reasons. One, they're delicious. Two, they are incredibly expensive in the grocery store. They're relatively disease and pest free. So you really have no excuse not to grow them in your garden. Now they may be easy to grow, but pruning them is often a point of a lot of confusion. Part of the reason for this is there's just a lot of different terms. We have primocanes, floricanes, summer bearing, fall bearing, everbearing. There's a lot of different terms, and actually getting it wrong could mean you get no fruit at all. But in this video, I'm going to show you it is incredibly easy. No matter what type of variety you're growing, you are only going to prune them one way, and that is to prune last year's growth at the end of summer. If you trust me, you can probably just turn the video off now and just do that, but it does require a little bit of explanation of why. So I am going to show you why you're going to do that so you can learn how to best take care of your raspberries. In order to understand how to properly prune raspberries, we need to learn a few key terms. The first thing we need to learn is the difference between a primocane and a floricane. Primocanes are canes or shoots that grew during this growing season. So they pop up in the spring and grow tall during the summer months. They then go dormant and become woody over the winter. The next year, those same primocanes are now considered floricanes. These are canes or shoots that grew the year before. Let's look at the first 2 years of growth after planting a bare root raspberry to illustrate this. So we plant a bare root raspberry under the soil, and after it breaks dormancy, it will start sending up its first canes. These canes will have green stems and emerge from nodes in the roots of your bare root plants. As we just learned, these canes are considered primocanes since they just started growing this year. These grow through the summer and then go dormant in the winter. The next year comes, the green primocanes from last year are now brown and woody. As spring comes, these canes will develop leaves directly off the canes. Since these are now in their second year, these are considered floricanes. These are the same shoots that were primocanes the year before. The primocanes overwintered, and the second year became the floricanes. The raspberry plant will also send up new fresh shoots the second year and every following year as well. These fresh shoots that came up that year are considered primocanes. The primocane shoots that come up during the second year will become the floricanes in year 3. Now that we know the difference between primocanes and floricanes, we need to talk about the different types of raspberry plants. There are really only 2 types of raspberry plants, but there are multiple names for them. Raspberry plants can be categorized into either plants that can produce fruit on primocanes or plants that can't produce fruit on primocanes. Of note, every type of raspberry plant can produce fruit on floricanes, so the only distinction is whether the plant can produce fruit on primocanes. Part of the confusion comes because people give these 2 types of raspberry plants a bunch of different names. So let's go over the different names you may hear and put them into one of these 2 categories. Raspberry plants that can produce fruit on primocanes are sometimes called primocane producing raspberries. But remember, these can also produce on floricanes as well. Raspberries that can only produce on floricanes are sometimes referred to as floricane producing raspberries. Another term for primocane producing raspberries is everbearing because they can produce fruit in the summer on floricanes and in the fall on primocanes. You may also hear primocane producing raspberries as fall bearing because the crop that comes on the primocanes occurs in the early fall. For the same reason, floricane producing raspberries are sometimes called summer bearing raspberries because raspberries that are produced on floricanes come in early to midsummer. I want to reiterate that all raspberries can produce fruit on floricanes and therefore produce fruit in the summer, but only some raspberry plants are able to produce on primocanes in the fall as well. So now that we know the difference between a primocane and a floricane, and we know that you can categorize raspberries into whether they can produce fruit on primocanes or cannot produce fruit on primocanes, let's discuss why I suggest you prune your raspberries in late summer no matter what type of raspberry plant you have. Let's compare the first couple of years of the 2 different types of raspberry plants. We will call them primocane producing and floricane producing, but remember the primocane producer can also produce on floricanes. So the first part of the first year is the same for both plants. You plant a bare root plant and it will shoot up some green shoots. These are the primocanes. As we get towards fall, however, the primocane producer will produce some fruit on the primocanes, while the floricane producer will not produce any fruit. Now, just as an aside, it may be a very small fruit set just because it's the first year you planted the plants. So that winter, we leave those canes on the plants, and now we are in year 2. Both plants now have woody stemmed canes that have overwintered. These are now the floricanes. Both plants will also send up new shoots this year. These are the new primocanes. Come midsummer, both types of plants will produce fruit on the floricanes. Once the fruit is harvested, however, these shoots will no longer produce fruit. So in both types of plants, you'll want to prune away only the floricanes in late summer after you have harvested the summer fruit off of the floricanes. It's important to not prune off the primocanes. In the fall, the primocane producing type of raspberry plant will give you a second harvest on the primocanes, but the floricane producer will not. Now that we've seen this on the whiteboard, let's go to an actual raspberry patch and look at the difference between primocanes and floricanes. All right, now that we know the difference between a primocane and a floricane and sort of how raspberries grow, let's look at that in real life in our raspberry patch. So these raspberries were planted from bare root last year. So last year they sent up their initial shoots, and those shoots were primocanes. That's right. But now that we are in year 2, the shoots that were primocanes last year are now floricanes. And remember, the floricanes are able to produce fruit mid-summer. I should say that all of our varieties are the primocane bearing or everbearing. Those are the same thing variety. But remember, I told you all raspberries can produce fruit on floricanes, and only some types of raspberries can produce fruit on primocanes, but that's the type of variety that we have. And it does seem like the industry, when you buy raspberry plants, they're a lot more likely to be primocane varieties, meaning they can bear fruit on primocanes the year the shoots come up. All right, so we're gonna look down here and I'm gonna show you a floricane and a primocane, and I'm gonna talk about what we're gonna prune and when. One thing is that's really nice to have for raspberries is these rose gloves, I think they're called, where the glove actually comes farther up on the arm just because you're gonna be down where some spikes are. All right, so let's take a look down here. I think we're gonna look at this one right here. All right, so I'm gonna pull back this. We'll see if we can get everything focused. But right in here, we're gonna look at a green stalk, which is a primocane, and a woody brown stalk, which is one of the floricanes. All right, I know I told you guys to wear gloves, but I can't quite get where I need to go without the gloves. So one thing we're looking at, oh my gosh, look how good these raspberries look. So these are the summer bearing raspberries that are bearing on the floricanes in the summer. All right, little quick intermission. I gotta eat these. They're so good. All right, back to the video. All right, so right in here, this stalk right there, that grew last year, and you can see it looks brown and kind of woody. That's a floricane, and you can't quite see it, but that's actually what's coming up and producing all of this fruit here. The primocanes are currently not producing any fruit. So what we're gonna be doing is eating all these delicious raspberries throughout June and early July. And at that point, the floricanes will finish producing and they will no longer produce any fruit on that cane. So sometime in mid to late summer, we're gonna come in and take out all of the floricanes, which is the growth that happened last year. So at that point, in somewhere around late July, those floricanes will have finished producing and they will not produce any more fruit on those canes, and they should be taken out to allow for more room for the primocanes, this year's growth, to flourish. All right, so then after we've pruned out all of these floricanes, which are producing now, in late July, what we'll be left with is all of these primocanes. You can see these tall, green stemmed plants. This was all growth that happened this year. So we will have pruned out all of the floricanes. We'll have the primocanes left because we have primocane bearing or fall bearing or everbearing. Remember, those are all the same thing. Varieties of raspberries in early fall. We are going to get another flush of fruit on the primocanes. And then what are we going to do next year? We're not going to prune them. All of these are going to become woody and have brown stems as they overwinter. And next summer, we'll be harvesting all the fruit off of these, which will be next year's floricanes. So I told you I have the primocane, everbearing, fall-bearing, all the same name, variety of plants, and that's oftentimes what you're going to find in the store. But what would happen if you had only the summer-bearing or floricane-bearing raspberry plants? Well, if you had those plants, you'd still want to prune them at the exact same time in late summer. The only difference is you wouldn't get that second set of raspberries in early fall. You would only get them in midsummer. Hopefully after watching this video, you can see why no matter what type of raspberry plant you have, you should prune off the floricanes or last year's growth, which is going to look brown or woody stemmed in late summer after they've produced their summer fruit. If this video is helpful for you, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not a subscriber and you like videos like this, consider subscribing to our channel. I got a lot more raspberries to harvest. They might make it into the house. We'll see. Happy gardening, everyone.